All right, let's go ahead and get started since we only had 45 minutes. My name is Craig Wheelock, and I'm at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm. I'm an analytical chemist, and I'll be co-moderating this with Bob.
I'm Bob Wright. I don't know how to use microphones. I'm a pediatrician. I'm at Mount Sinai School of Medicine, and I'm also an environmental scientist.
Just start talking.
But unless you're Bob.
Yeah. So I'm Tom Metz. I'm at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. I suppose I was originally trained as a bioanalytical chemist. I guess I'm like a multi-omics person these days. Yeah, happy to be here.
Great. And then online, Delia, would like to introduce yourself, please.
Hello everyone. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for the invitation. First of all, I'm Delia Nicoară. I'm a physician by background, but also the European coordinator for the Personalized Prevention Network and for the prevention task in the Comprehensive Cancer Network as well. Happy to see you and to be here.
Thank you. And then our other panel member online?
Emmanuel.
He could not make it. So we are the panel. We few, we happy few. Okay, that's very good. So the intention with the panel this afternoon is to try and learn from past efforts. We've heard a number of challenges and opportunities throughout the day today, but also within the context of this, we want to be careful not to reinvent the wheel. There's a large history of bold projects that have been done on scale, and we want to be able to learn from these and draw from this information so we can apply it in our efforts for the exposome. So the panel members have been asked to bring in their collective knowledge from working with large-scale projects to think about all the different facets of this, everything from logistics to technical challenges to ethics, how we can learn from this and apply it with our efforts for the exposome.
So I'm going to channel a question that was asked at the end of the last session about how do we not overpromise. And I'm going to slightly rephrase it as I think you probably have to overpromise to some degree, but at what point do you go too far? And I'm going to ask Tom that question.
Thanks. I was tasked with talking about the Human Genome Project, and I'll caveat this with saying I was 15 years old when the Human Genome Project launched. I was not involved, but I had the pleasure and the privilege and the honor to talk with two gentlemen in the past few years who were integral in that project. One was Charles Delia, who was then the director of the Office of Health and Environmental Research at Department of Energy, which is where the project initially originated. And I also had a chance to interact a few times with Ari Petrinos, who eventually succeeded Charles Delia in that same office. And Ari definitely acknowledges that there was a degree of overpromising in the origination of the Human Genome Project, but to the point you have to overpromise to some extent to get people behind it and to fund it. But now we know, 20 plus years later, that it's not the only contributor to the development of chronic disease. So it's going to be a balance for the Human Exposome Project of can we be forward-looking enough to know where the promises end and where the gaps might still remain if such a complementary effort were to be launched by the community as a whole.
I'm going to channel what you said with a little bit of an observation. In the parlance of the business world, everybody here is an early adapter. We don't require any convincing, but we're a minority of the biomedical research enterprise, and the majority are going to be skeptical. So are there did he offer any techniques for how you speak to the skeptical? Because that is actually what you're going to find when you leave this room.
Yeah. So in Charles Delia provided me 2 chapters of his memoir. And there were a number of workshops that took place, one of which he commissioned, which was the Santa Fe workshop. But there was resistance, he said, for about the first year. And then it didn't necessarily go completely quiet, but it subsided a little bit because the positive momentum counterbalanced the resistance that was being raised by some, particularly the fear that investing $3 billion into a single project was going to suck too much opportunity away from individual investigator-led research. So there was resistance among the community, but as I see what's taking place here, I feel like even though this is a small portion of the overall biomedical research community, there is still, I would say, a strong presence here, both nationally and internationally from a variety of disciplines. And in looking back at how the Human Genome Project launched, it really was behind the scenes effort and really force of will of Charles DeLisi to make this happen. Establishing subcommittees within the agency that he led, or the office that he led at
Is that
the
Department of Energy?
It was initially, yeah, which was odd. But as he pointed out, back then, the Department of Energy had the managerial infrastructure and the know-how to execute large projects, mainly on the physics side of things. But at that time, relative to the NIH didn't have a whole lot of experience in that realm. Eventually, it made sense to move it over to NIH to administer, but initially it launched and originated from Department of Energy. But he was going to the Hill and talking with people in various subcommittees. He became acquainted, I'm not sure exactly how, with Pete Domenici, who was a senator from New Mexico, who was very interested in this project because Los Alamos National Laboratory was in his backyard in New Mexico. And Los Alamos at that time was doing a lot of things in terms of developing gene libraries and so forth. So he could immediately see the return on investment to his constituency and a national laboratory, an important one, in his backyard. So he got on board. And Pete also was the lead of a particular subcommittee, I don't remember which one, within Congress that was integral into getting the momentum built within Congress itself. So that was one aspect of Charles' behind-the-scenes work. He was also working with folks in OMB in the White House. He was really, I don't know how well known it is, how much work he did behind the scenes, interfacing with folks in politics to get the momentum behind the project. And so that's one thing that I don't see here yet, is a champion in a federal agency that's going to do the behind-the-scenes work that Charles did. Maybe there is someone here that's been doing that, and I'm just not aware.
And for those of us who don't know who he is, where was he in the hierarchy of the Department of Energy?
So he was the director of the Office of Health and Environmental Research. So he, I think, answered directly to the secretary or the head of Department of Energy at that time.
So I should also confess that I made myself look smart by asking Department of Energy. Tom actually told me that it was Department of Energy like a year and a half ago. So I was just repeating information that he gave me.
I'm considered a contractor, even though I work at a national laboratory.
Great.
No, that was really interesting. Thanks, Tom. Moving to Delia, while we have you online, in the context of this, so Tom expressed how there was a clear need for a champion to execute the Human Genome Project. In the networks you've been involved in with cancer prevention in Europe, how have you seen them evolve and be organized?
Thank you so much for the question. I mean, as you can imagine, in Europe, you have the most diverse community possible. You have the member states for European Commission, like 27 member states, and the associated member states, and it's very difficult to actually have an aligned strategy. So this is what we tried time and time again to come with. That's why 3 years ago, actually, we started one of the biggest initiatives in prevention, the new networks of personalized prevention. And this is something that all member states, they are all involved. And we are trying basically to come up with the best strategy possible for different healthcare systems and for different countries, different cultures. So you can imagine how difficult this is. I have also prepared a presentation, a couple of slides, because the numbers are quite impressive, but let me know if you still wanna share the slides or we just have an open discussion. I would like to share that with you just
We
to
said,
have
yeah,
an idea.
we're
Yeah,
getting
we
a thumbs
got a
up
thumbs
for you,
up.
yes.
Perfect. So I think I have my colleagues here.
We can see it there.
Thank you so much. So I've already told you about personalized prevention. This is one of the biggest network. We can move to the next slide. I think you all know the issues that we have regarding cancer, because this is a cancer dedicated network of expertise. More than 1 million deaths in Europe annually. We can move to the next slide because we already talked about it. And this is the project. You can see the entire Europe is collaborating and trying to work together. And we have almost 100 different institutions that are working on this one. Over the period of 4 years, we are trying to accomplish this collaboration and this network in oncology.
Is it okay if
Next slide, please.
There we go. Is it okay if I interrupt you during your talk? Because this raises a lot of
Yes,
questions
please.
in line with the discussions
Yes,
that
of course.
Tom and Bob were just having. If you look at the numbers on here with the number of countries and affiliated entities involved, I mean, how was this initiated? What is the driver to get it moving? I mean, with this type of size, the inertia to put this together and be the driving force behind it, like we just heard, how did that happen?
This is the plan for that European Commission launched.
But I mean,
European
the commission's an
Union
entity. I mean, who is the persons? This must have been someone's vision or dream to make it happen.
This is the mission of cancer they are responsible for, and collaborating with the member states, with the ministries from each member state, they will basically allocate a competent authority. So which institution is the best one regarding cancer in your country. And of course, the Ministry of Health knows this type of information. And of course, you want to help all the other institutions that you can help. So the competent authority will nominate the affiliated entities for that member state. And you will create a national consortium. And with the national consortium, you will collaborate with the other European partners. So this is how such of a big consortium is created. But you know what, to be totally honest with you, we did not start it with such a huge consortium 3 years ago. We had smaller projects before. We had Icahn, for example. It was just a couple of member states that were associated, but year after year, consortium, they got bigger and bigger because also institutions, they
Right. So
were...
how did you get bigger and bigger then? I mean, was this a defined lobbying attempt? I mean, was there a strategy? Was it organic? I mean, how did you grow from something small at inception to something of this size?
By basically collaborating with between member states, between countries, between ministries of health, by evolving with the strategy for cancer. Oncology and cancer is one of the most discussed subjects now at EU level.
So
And this is how everything evolved time after time.
So Delia, I'm
We
sorry
had
to interrupt,
for
but
example,
I was hoping to take a step back so we could maybe learn from this process. So when you're speaking to, say, funders, let's say you're riding an elevator with a billionaire, but they're skeptical, you basically, I think, only really have two levers. You can convince people because of money, they're going to make money from this, or you can convince them because of emotion. You can say that this is important, and you, rather than appeal to them with numbers, which is just money, you appeal to them with emotional stories. And I would assume that cancer has a lot of emotional stories. So were there stories that were used to help convince people? And can you give us some examples?
I mean, if you talk with the Ministry of Health and you just launched the invitation, are there cancer centers that want to join such a network? It was not an issue of finding the cancer centers that will want to join, but an issue of now we have too many people that want to join, so how we will distribute the budget. So, of course, you are totally right. Initially, I mean, and even now, it was not a matter of numbers of money, it was a matter of emotion for sure. And this is just one of the initiatives. Jane, too, we have other initiatives which are even bigger in terms of partners and numbers now. I think the oncology community is now pretty much educated in terms of collaborating and in terms of sharing know-how. I think this is one of the most important actually steps that we are doing now in Europe. I think we become to be very good at sharing information and sharing knowledge between the countries. And this is what sets maybe the healthcare systems here apart.
So
I don't know if I answered your question.
I mean, no, I mean, it's very helpful. I mean, we're trying to basically identify and isolate key components that have led to your success. So sharing and collaboration, that's a key thing. And I think what Bob and I are trying to get at based upon Tom's comments was how do things get initiated though? I mean, what is the spark that enables this type of development? And I think, you know, in cancer, maybe it's more of a common ontology in the sense that, you know, everybody knows somebody who's had cancer. It becomes very emotional and personal in that way. And if we talk about the exposome, which that in itself is a word that maybe it's not quite as common as PCR is now, but if you say cancer, there's no one who doesn't know the word cancer. But the word exposome, that's a little more abstract.
it's also harder to pronounce. So I'll go back to Tom. Thank you, Delia. Knowing what you know about the project, have you heard about regrets about mistakes that were made that may have slowed down the project, or were there things that they would do differently if they could go back in time?
I don't know if mistakes per se. I did reach out to Ari Petrinos and I asked him these questions, and he said his answer for what they would absolutely do again would be to involve people from a broad array of disciplines. So they had physicists, chemists, folks that you might not think would provide valuable input into sequencing the human genome. They were soliciting their opinion. And I think one regret potentially that Ari had was he didn't push to involve them sooner. He said it made a lot of people irritated in more of the biological sciences realm, but he wanted that the people looking at the project through different lenses. Physicists, for example. Ultimately, the Human Genome Project was an engineering and infrastructure building project, and that was really what got it over the threshold of support in terms of congressional funding. You know, it had a beginning and an end, a clear end. And as I've been thinking about the exposome, I don't think the exposome necessarily ever ends because exposures change throughout.
Well, I would argue
time.
that it ends when we die. So
Well,
there is
for-
at the individual
Yes,
level,
yes, yeah,
there is
for-
an end.
Yeah, yeah,
So-
yeah.
And having said that, and I'm channeling Tom, so this isn't coming from me, it's coming from him.
Yeah.
So maybe if we think about life stage
Mhm.
as the framework, and this will also get into design, because if we start a longitudinal study in pregnancy and we follow people till they die, we'll all be dead too. So maybe we need to think of some sort of design, like a time series where we enroll people at different life stages in this calendar year and measure them. But it's actually, I'm a pediatrician, that's how growth charts were made. The first growth charts were actually just a series of cross-sectional measurements at different ages, and they just averaged them out. And they eventually did a longitudinal growth chart. It started when I was a resident, And, it finished, about 10, 15 years later as the kids grew up. But, I do think, because we're going to have to present this to people who will be skeptical, and maybe we don't want to say that it's open-ended. So thank you for bringing that up.
I would definitely not.
And I think we can create a design that says that this is how we'll know we'll actually do the different life stages, and we'll do it in a cross-sectional manner to begin with. And then maybe, those kids that we enroll, we could try to follow till they're dead, but even the person you're talking to is going to be dead by that time that happens. I don't know. But I'm just trying to channel what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I like the concept, and I think you can point to screening for inborn errors of metabolism as a key positive outcome, and is probably the best contribution to date of metabolomics-related technologies for routine healthcare. Completely overlooked that metabolomics-related technologies and approaches led to that, but I agree. I think a longitudinal cohort would be powerful. A cross-sectional cohort would be powerful, but it has to be well-defined. It absolutely has to be well-defined, because there's going to have to be an estimate of budget that someone is going to have to take to, someone in the political arena that can get behind it. And, if you try and go too big, then maybe it won't be palatable, particularly in today's environment.
Thanks. I think that you really raised a very good point, that there has to be a defined project with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you just say money forever, then that's harder to get behind. But Delia, bringing that question back to you, maybe you could stop screen sharing so we could see you again. Right now we just see your slide. But you're involved in a cancer screening project, so screening will be an ongoing action. There is no end to that, I assume. You want to put in a screening protocol, which would continue in existence. Is that accurate?
Yeah, oh yes, of course.
Yeah.
And we have a couple of issues here. If you look at the healthcare professionals, there is now a clear situation, at least in Europe, that fewer students at medicine and resident doctors will choose oncology or oncology-related specialties, because now you want to have like a better work-life balance, right? So in order for us to actually adopt prevention, we would need more screening programs and more strategies regarding personalized prevention. But you have different healthcare systems, so how do you implement a screening that will be functional? Nowadays in Europe, we have breast cancer screening programs, we have cervical cancer screening programs, we are lacking lung cancer screening programs, for example. So this is something that we are working together in this project as well, to start and implement those in each member state, not maybe just in the Nordic states where they pretty much have established a clear screening program. So I would agree totally with your assessment, but I think we actually need to do even more to be more prepared for the years to come.
And how could you conceive of expanding that to, an exposome monitoring program? You can think of one of the extensions of what we're discussing here is that you can, the same way you're screening for cancer, you would have a annual exposome checkup. Can you imagine or discuss some of the ways that might be implemented or executed?
This will be the goal actually for another project. Is the project that I'm right now here in Turin. It's the EU Cancer Screen project. So I think I might be able to answer to you probably in a year from now, because we just launched today, actually.
Oh,
This
congratulations.
So I have a follow-up question for Delia. So what you described with the screening program, that addresses the issue of how does this help me? And I think that's an important question that we have to answer. So if we want funders, if we want the general public to be behind this, we have to be able to articulate in just a sentence or two how does this help me? Or how it will help you? And I'm not sure, I'm not saying that we have that quick answer, but I wonder if we shouldn't be thinking about that. Like, are we talking about exposome screening? And there are these movements happening right now, like the Make America Healthy Again movement and the longevity movement and the health span movement. And there's a new field called functional medicine. And all of those fields really do touch the exposome. In fact, they make me think that exposomics is sort of this, I sometimes wonder if exposome shouldn't be defined as the science that helps us understand why people can't eat right, exercise, not smoke, and not drink. Because we all know if we do those 4 things, we're going to be really healthy, but we can't do it as a population. And maybe we need to think about how we're going to screen people to tell them what it is that's preventing the, and form social bonds, to get social media into it, but to help people understand what they need to do to live a healthier life.
It's called stress, Bob.
So, I mean, one of the things we're trying to articulate here is to learn from other initiatives that have been successful. And so we can, help plan how we want to get started here. I mean, based upon your knowledge of, the Human Genome Project, Tom, I mean, what would you say, what are some of the more logistical considerations that we should contemplate at this stage?
I think certainly knowing the start and stop points, that's going to be important to articulate. To Bob's point, what are going to be the benefits for humanity as an outcome, bringing it back to the folks that are going to ultimately make the decisions. Perhaps we should offer to take blood from an interested congressperson and then show them, look, you've got all these chemicals in here. Do you know what these are associated with and what risks may present to you? That might help it get over the hurdle. But what I do like to see here in this room is the diversity in expertise and countries and agencies that are represented, because with the human genome, we were talking about 4 individual molecules that were bound together in repeating order. We knew what DNA looked like through the work of Rosalind Franklin and Watson and Crick. It was just, the project was to determine the order in a human being. The exposome, even though chemicals are largely having the same composition as DNA, with maybe some differences in halogens and things for man-made, how those things are put together, you're really only limited by what constitutes a thermodynamically stable chemical structure. The chemical space is immense. That's why we use such a variety of technologies to measure it, because one technology just doesn't do the job. And even that technology is a little bit of a forced fit, in my opinion.
I think Michelle's signaling that we should open up questions. Is that it? Yes, please.
No. Absolutely, of course. Very happy to open up to. It's hard to see up here, but
Yeah, go ahead. You're
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate this conversation about thinking what the endpoints are for the project. And the Human Genome Project is a really interesting example, because I don't think we sold the Human Genome Project on the idea of mapping the genome. It was what we would do once the genome was mapped that was the real selling point. And so looking back on that project now, were we able to exploit the human genome into clinical benefit effectively, efficiently, quickly enough? And if we were to do it over again, would there be a way to make those gains, realize those gains faster? In my opinion, things were a little slow and ad hoc, and it could have been more deliberate, but I'm sure I'm certainly not an expert in that program. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So I also don't know if I would offer a completely accurate view on the overall success and timeliness to immediate impact of the Human Genome Project. Certainly there have been successes. I think some of the perhaps underappreciated successes are just the advancement in infrastructure and technology that paralleled the actual achieving of the ultimate goal of determining the Human Genome Project. We now have fantastic capabilities in high throughput sequencing at really affordable costs comparatively to if I wanted to determine all of the proteins and small molecules in my body. That's a much more expensive effort. We now have the CRISPR technology for gene editing. Whether we should use that or not is maybe more of an ethical debate in terms of actually modifying the genome of, say, a fetus in utero, which has been done other places before and received a lot of pushback on whether that was completely ethical or not. And so I think there have been good outcomes from the human genome. Did we solve long-term health and disease in humans? No. But now, 20 years later, we realize that the human genome is contributing about 30% or so, some say as little as 10% to the predictive ability of who is going to suffer from a long-term chronic disease in the future. So in that sense, maybe there was too much overselling of what the ultimate outcome would be, but
Although they got funded, so it's
they got
depends on your
funded,
perspective.
yeah.
What is overselling?
True, and I don't think they knew, right? They didn't know going into it where it would stand today in terms of being able to explain and intervene in a system to reverse some course that was trending towards a poor outcome.
Thank you.
Fenna Johns Hopkins University, and I wanted to bring it back to funding because a lot of people in the room have asked me that question too, like what are we doing here if we can't get funding? And I was actually intrigued Delia, where did you guys get the funding from? And Tom, you mentioned with the Human Genome Project, it was just the federal money, but there's way more money out there than under the federal funds, right? So, and I know that cancer, like the public donates to cancer. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but when I grew up, it was like you put all your pocket money in for cancer. So there is money out there in different ways. How did you, Delia, tap into it, and what are your ideas on getting us funded?
So for these projects that I described, this is funding from the European Commission. That's the money, they are then distributed to the member states depending on the role that the country will have in that project. So if you are the leader for, let's say, prevention, obviously you will get a bigger amount of money because you have to coordinate at European level that task. But you are totally right. The money will not be like endless, right? So you need to find the best solutions by the end of the project to make it sustainable and to integrate the program or whatever you found out over that period, to integrate it into your national healthcare system. Of course, donations and all of that are part not of these specific projects, but at national level when you try to evolve with the project. And to keep everyone informed, obviously you always engage cancer patient organizations because they really keep you grounded and very humble in whatever you're doing, because they ask the real questions and the basic questions. So it's mandatory for us as healthcare professionals to always be ready to answer to that.
Great. Thank you. In the interest of time, I want to move on. I think you were next.
Seth Murray, Texas A&M University. I like the idea of outcome-based endpoints. In population-based genotyping, we have LD. We see diminishing returns, right? In phenomics, to saturate the phenome, once we see those diminishing predictors, there's nothing else that can predict that we don't already know. Can we do something the same with the exposome where, whatever set of predictors you have, the next predictor you capture has less predictive information? Do you think that would work?
Maybe, I don't know.
I was thinking of what Tom said. When they started the Human Genome Project, they didn't realize, we kind of look backwards and say, oh, they overpromised, but I don't think they realized they were overpromising. And so I don't think we can answer your question until we've started a Human Genome Project, at least have enough data to start to answer your question.
And just quickly regarding funding, the Human Genome Project ultimately was a line item, I think, in the 1987 budget of Ronald Reagan. But I also that was the public effort. There was also a private effort that was led by J. Craig Ventnor. I don't know how much of, I guess, venture capital was put into that effort. And there was some competition going on there. Maybe they could have gotten it done much, much faster had there been more cooperation between those two efforts.
One could argue that it went faster because of competition, too.
That's true also, yeah.
Rick?
Yeah, actually, I need to make a comment along those lines. I think Venture actually triggered the international public community to start getting their act together and started collaborating. Anyway, Tom, I stood up to the microphone because you were 15 when the Genome Project launched. I was actually a junior scientist at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, so I was part of the DOE enterprise. I remember Delisi and Petrinos. And I also remember that they thought DOE could do this because DOE did big projects. And what was originally sold to the scientific community was this big technological project. And I just remember my mentor and others, it wasn't clear to them how this would benefit the work that they were doing. And it was also, and this is in the early 1980s, I don't know if any of you else remember this, but there were some very tight budgets back then. There were rescissions to existing grants. So people were very nervous about if this new big technological innovation project that they didn't really understand what it's going to do for them is going to draw money away from R01 funded grants. So it's something to keep in mind. Yeah. So I think it was once, and I don't know the details, it moved from DOE to the NIH. And I think there's something we can learn from that. And I think what happened when it moved to the NIH is that there was much more of a focus on the bold vision of how this can transform medicine. So it wasn't just about the technological capabilities to sequence DNA on a large scale, but it was about transforming medicine and bringing a personalized touch to the American people, and it's not just U.S., but it was a global effort. So I think that's critical, and I want to put in the case for again that vision, that bold vision. It's about health, and I think the thing we have going for us now, unlike the early 1980s, is that people are now comfortable with large collaborative efforts, partly because of the Genome Project being as successful as it was. And I think there are many people who are studying the etiology of human disease are realizing that we can get maybe 30–40% of the way there with genomics, but we need the environment. And I think we can create the vision around what data do you collect in a way that can truly bring us over the finish line. So just something I think we should think about. What's that message that we create that other scientists can get behind, and then members of Congress and others, both in the United States, across the globe, working collaboratively together.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Can you let Vasilis up there? I can't. Yes.
Yes. Hello. My name is Kostas Stelos from the Heidelberg University, Germany. In our panel today, in this session, we're trying to find ways how to launch and how to finance this project. In my personal view that I would like to share with you, I see the Human Exposome Project as a logical continuation of the Human Genome Project. The Human Genome Project actually is the best justification why do we need the Human Exposome Project from my point of view. I'm a cardiologist, MD, a health scientist and life scientist, and what we found out from the Human Genome Project is that the genes themselves, they play a very minor role. We know this even in twins. So actually it's the environment that plays the massive role. However, beyond the normal risk factors like smoking, aging, hypertension, food, we know very little about it, and we know very little about the signaling pathways, then the molecules that are involved in the intersection crosstalk between environment and the human host responses. So I think this is how we need to sell. what I would like to add is that the Gen2 project in the European Union is a top-down approach where the politicians, they gather together, they get a budget, essential budget from every member of the European Commission, the European Union, and they have to spend it. And they have to spend also for health issues. And yes, cancer is very successful that we can all learn from how to get finances to help this. And Exposome could benefit not only from the anti-cancer strategies, but in general health strategies. But from my point of view, we should not focus only on health and life. Agricultural, physics, chemistry, they all could profit from a human exposome project.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I think we have to move on to more questions.
We're over time, so we just,
Just catalog, make sure we get the questions for the record, and there's also one online, and then maybe we can finish up. Is that all right?
yeah. Thanks, Michelle.
So, you want me to just go ahead and say questions online? So, first of all, what can we learn from the Ann Haynes, which has been fairly successful on that? Second of all, what can we learn from the children's study, National Children's Study versus ECHO, and where there were certain coalitions, but yet the immensity of it and some of the cost of the exposure was what sunk it. So I think those three things are important, and I was so glad you said the involvement of biotech, because that was huge. Everybody could see an opportunity financially in their character, in their area, to make money. So thanks.
Thank you.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Jeffrey Carr, I'm Senior Science Editor at The Economist. Just as an aside to point out that 40% of the Genome Project was done in the UK with UK funding from a foundation. But what I actually wanted to posit was a different model, and the model is the Human Cell Atlas, which is halfway between a project that has a clear ending and one that's open-ended. Was started by a couple of scientists working independently, and gradually built up from the bottom up. Laboratories all over the world now, different sources of funding. Quite a lot of the funding is raised by the laboratories themselves. The project coordinates things, but doesn't really impose from the top. But it has a plan that's divided the body up, the organs up to amongst various laboratories. It's an extremely successful project. It's bottom up. It's not imposed from the top. If governments want to get involved with money, that's fine. But I think it's a very interesting model, and you might want to consider it.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we've got one.
Yeah, I have a question from the virtual. With the Genome collaboration, commercial interest could see a return on investment and even competed with collaborative effort. What is the return on investment for commercial interest in the exposome when there is a possibility that their products or byproducts may be getting into people's internal environment and may be associated with negative effects?
Can I answer that? Is it okay if I answer that last one? What's the return on investment? So when I think of what is the most game-changing biomedical finding the last, say, 20 years, it's GLP-1 drugs. And what do? They help you lead a healthy lifestyle. And so there is definitely interest in leading a healthy lifestyle, and there are economic interests and ways to make money. And if exposomics can tap into that, I think it can have a really huge economic impact.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Delia, very, very much. Let's give them a round of applause.